I think it was first detected when I was about 10, 11 years old in primary school. I remember one occasion where the teacher let me run the drama session in the class at school, and I organised everybody, told them what parts they were playing, what the adventure was, and I set the scene and moved the tables and the chairs in around the classroom and did it all. And he encouraged me to pursue drama, acting, writing, drama and acting really at that time. And suppose that's where it started. All through my teenage years I wrote short stories, poems, songs, once I learned to play the guitar. And then when I was about 19, 20, I founded an amateur drama group based in my local church. And we had guys, young people from about 5, 10 different churches involved. And we toured all around Darlington and the North East at various church festivals and things. And then I got married, and it all kind of like fell by the wayside until my early 30s, when I began a theatre and education company, again running in collaboration with a number of local churches and charities. And we used to go into schools and do theatre shows using puppets, magic tricks, drama, and I wrote about 80% of the material that we used over the 4 or 5 year period. Most of it was written by me, and that's where it all began. And then I went to do a performing arts course, mainly for acting, and while I was there I ended up writing 2 theatre plays as part of the National Stewart Drama Festival. And I remember 2 of my tutors at college telling me that I was a better writer than I was an actor, and that I ought to pursue writing as a career. And I applied for the Northern Film School and got a place there. Yeah, you don't realise at the time how influential teachers can be, but I would say it was teachers when I was 10 who first identified that I had a gift for drama, if you like. And then again when I was in my late 30s, that I could do writing, that I was good at. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a good writer, I would say I'm a capable writer. I think I can do good stuff. And there's so many people wanting to get into the industry, either writing scripts, writing for theatre, writing for radio, writing for television. It's such a demanding job, industry to break into. I think the trick is to prove that you are capable of turning your hand to several different things and being able to work in a professional manner. I think that's what people want to see from a writer, that they know the professional standards that are required from them and working towards that. Oh, it must be 3 years ago now. I got approached by a film producer who said that they had funding, or some initial funding anyhow, for an idea for a screenplay that they had, but they didn't have a writer. So they asked me and several other people to submit as an example of writing along the premise that they gave. And it was kind of fantastical, romantic, fairy tale type stuff. And I did it and thought, this is rather good. I wasn't chosen, I got down to the last 3 or last 4, something like that. But the idea of creating a romantic fantasy comedy, kind of that seed was sown. And then about a year later, or 6 months later, maybe not even that long, I decided I want to try and write 10 pages of something that's quite fantastical, delightful, charming. And I wrote 10 pages and showed it around a few chosen friends, in the industry, and they said, well, it is quirky, so give it a bit shot, give it a better shot, try and see if you can write a full script in this kind of style. And the challenge really with Falling for Frank is not to write a romantic comedy, but the challenge has been to write a quirky, off-the-wall, odd-beat romantic comedy with elements of music and fantasy thrown into it. So we don't know where it's going at the moment. The jury's still out. With Falling for Frank, I had this idea, and what I needed to create was then two characters to work alongside the idea. So Frank was one of them, and Alice is the other. And I spent a long time working on their characters. I think the first 30 pages, the first act 1 of the script, I must have written 10 times before I decided to proceed with the rest of act 1 into the rest of the draft, because I wanted to get the characters right. So I wrote a treatment out, and I wrote like a storyboard out, and I wrote character profiles out, and I really worked hard at studying my character profiles to see, were these two people going to gel? Was there enough in their characters that would make an audience want to watch them? Spent a lot of time developing the characters and just tinkering about with the first act to see what things worked and what things didn't work. To be honest, the characters aren't really in the screenplay long enough to really justify an in-depth character profile. But for Frank and Alice, I remember writing and rewriting what kind of hair colour I thought worked, what kind of walk I thought worked for them, what kind of attitudes I felt they ought to have, what kind of emotions did I want them to express at particular points. Was I delivering on the emotion? Was I delivering on the character? What were their motivations for eventually getting together? How did they react to events in their lives? How did they react to the bittersweet nature of their friendship? So I spent a lot of time working those things through and thinking about them, you know. I wanted to put music into it. So I have a good friend who is a folk singer, and she's got the voice of an angel, but she's completely bonkers, and she has no objections to me saying that about her, because she's a delightful girl and she knows I think she's wonderful, but she is quite positively bonkers. And so I studied this friend of mine, this singer, and I wove the character of Alice around that. And in order to plot out the story, I used songs that she'd written. I asked her to write some songs, and I gave her outlines of what I wanted what was happening in certain parts of the script, and I gave her a rough draft of the script. And then we kind of like used the songs as plot points. So it's an unconventional script. It doesn't follow a strict 3-act structure. It follows very much like a musical theatre structure, where the music and the songs actually deliver a plot point. So this makes Falling for Frank slightly different to the average Hollywood romantic comedy. It's just, I wanted to do something as far removed from a Hollywood romantic comedy as it was absolutely possible to do. I looked at stuff like Mozart's Così fan tutte. I went to see Carmen at the opera, and I looked at how they actually use songs to drive a narrative. And this is what I've tried to do. In the screenplay, the songs aren't written down, the lyrics aren't written down there, but there's a note in there which says a song now follows along this particular theme, so anybody reading the screenplay will be able to see what the songs are actually doing at any given particular point in the screenplay. The two esoteric and a little bit cheeky at times and it takes up too much room on the page, and I don't really think I want the lyrics in at the moment. We might have to put them in if it goes to a production draft. We might have to put them in then. But at the moment, for people reading it, I don't think that's necessary. I think, if I'm honest, I tend to write purely to express my ideas as a creative writer, screenwriter. But I am conscious of budget when I am writing, and I am aware that certain scenes will cost more than others. But I don't think that a writer should approach a script with budgets at the forefront of his mind, because I think that will hinder character development, motivation, dramatic conflict. I think you need to get those things right, and hopefully you will find a budget for what you want to do in the end. I like the initial outburst of ideas and characters and plot and development. So I like the first couple of months that you're with a screenplay, and your head's full of all kinds of ideas, and you want to experiment with different things, and just push as many boundaries as you can. So I like that initial phase a lot. But I actually quite like editing. I do like editing scripts, 5th, 6th, 7th draft if need be, because I do think that it's part of your craft is to edit. And I think unless you learn to be a good editor, unless you learn to craft a script, you will never get it right. So I do kind of relish at times the editing process once we've got the script out there and we've had feedback. Inception, I thought, was very adventurous, but that stands out amongst many others that I've seen where there was no real intelligence in the script, where they hadn't really made an effort to say or do anything remarkable or innovative. They just pretty much followed Robert McKee's story and crafted a screenplay which has all the required elements of what a screenplay is meant to be, but doesn't have heart and soul. And I think that's what I find so sad about what Hollywood's producing now, from my perspective, to say some of the classic movies that I love from, say, the 60s, 70s or even the 80s. I think the last 20 years has seen a decline in soul and heart, and it's just too formulaic. Something like Donnie Darko, which is dark, it's moody, but it's exceptionally intelligent, and it's written in a wonderful way, so you feel drawn into the characters, feeling drawn into their world. But that would never have been made by a mainstream studio. It took an independent to do it. And again, films like Little Miss Sunshine, which got turned down by a lot of the major studios, and it was only the independents that picked it up. So I think I would like to see a lot more innovation, a lot more risk-taking. But under the current economic climate, risk-taking is about the last thing that most Hollywood studios are prepared to do. Some days I set page counts, some days I set words count, some days I set goals to do with scenes or characters. But I usually get up, have my breakfast, get to my desk, and I'll answer my emails, and I'll do whatever business I have to do, and then stop for lunch and have a look at what I've written the day before I always go over what I've written the day before and make amendments, make notes even, and then continue. And I must work on some days 6-7 hours a day, writing, editing, rewriting. I know with the Leonardo novel, I was setting myself a target of 10 pages a day. But with the screenplay, sometimes I've written the first act in a week, and other times it's taking me a month, 2 months to write the first act. So it just depends, each screenplay is different, but I think the important thing is to be disciplined and to just make sure that you do it every day. I think the trick is to get a friendly producer. I think go to networking in meetings, events, build up your list of contacts. I've got producers and directors that I've known now who, if I write something new, I can go to and say, what do you think of this? And some of them will be purely there just to give me feedback, but some of them might be potential clients who I think, well, if they like it, they might be prepared to take it on. But I think it's absolutely invaluable to attend networking evenings, to get feedback from professionals on your work as well, because what you might think is absolutely ready, somebody else in the industry won't think is ready. And I've been blessed because I've got a couple of script editors that I can call on who've done work on a national level, who can give me feedback on my work. But I think it's absolutely essential that you must build up a network and a list of contacts. Yeah, I've written a novel called Leonardo, The Divine Proposition, but the novel is actually based upon the screenplay that I wrote of the same name. So the screenplay existed first. The problem I had with the screenplay was that the UK Film Council budgeted at 50 million, and they said no production company in this country will take it without Hollywood money behind it. But they said the idea itself is absolutely cracking. It's a marvellous concept for the film. And a lot of people who I spoke to 6-7 years ago were encouraging me to write the novel. They said, Paul, write the novel, because if the novel sells, then it will publicise the story and you've got more chances of getting the screenplay made. So I started writing the novel. It took 6 years to write, off and on, because I had other things to do at the same time, like Falling for Frank. But off and on, it took 6 years to write, and it's now with a publisher. Now they're an ebook publisher. I did try to get mainstream publishers. Most of the comments I got back from the big boys were that they are not taking on new writers of historical drama at this time, given the financial difficulties. One very good publisher wrote back to me and said, we believe your book has the potential to be a blockbuster, but unfortunately we are not publicising historical drama at this moment. So that was a bit of a disappointment, but I eventually kept trying, and I got this ebook publisher, and I've spoken to them now, and they think the idea, the premise is marvellous. They really love the story, and without giving too much away, it's based upon Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. So it explores a myth surrounding the painting of the Last Supper, and it asks questions: who these characters were, how did Leonardo da Vinci choose them, who opposed him, what obstacles were in his way, and some of the internal conflicts as well with Leonardo da Vinci, because he was a man who was incredibly driven, and I suppose we would say he had an ego, but he lived in a time where paintings, particularly religious paintings, were meant to be done for the glory of God and the status of the church. So there's this internal conflict between going on inside him. Who is he painting this marvellous painting for? Is he painting it for himself and for his own glory and adulation, or is he actually painting it for God and the devotion and adulation of God? So there's internal conflicts as well, and there's a romantic interest in it. There's some sex and violence and body stripping and blood and guts. So I think it's got a combination of different things. So hopefully it'll get published in October, and from there we'll see how it what happens. But it's called Leonardo, the Divine Proposition, and hopefully if it's a success then we'll get the film made. Well, I've had to think about this one very, very carefully, primarily because there were some quite graphic sex scenes in it, and then with 50 Shades of Grey taking off in the way that it has done, I had this conflict. Some people were saying to me, take the sex scenes out because your demographic is really serious readers who enjoy historical drama, and they will be put off by scenes of graphic sex. And other people were saying to me, no, keep it in because sex at the moment is selling. But I've decided to take most of the sex scenes out.
Why?
Because because I don't want to be salacious and scandalous. I think the story deserves a credible readership. It deserves serious thought, because it does raise certain questions about your soul, the nature of art, what it is to be a creative person. And I didn't want those issues to be clouded over or masked by the fact that there were a number of scandalous sex scenes in it. So I have thought about my readership, and I do want it to be people who enjoy historical drama, and to try and get a serious readership, and not just people who are looking at for titillation.